What is going on, guys? Day number 2 here in Dallas, Texas, and today is the Meetup game. Andrew Neeme, Brad, Owen, Meetup game here. The place is packed, over 10 2-5 tables, playing bomb pots. It's going to be some good action. Yesterday on day 1 was pretty good. We played on the live stream, 5, 10, 20, went okay, and then we played some 2-5 no limit, ended up making about $900 our first day. So, day number 2, we're going to get in there, play some hands. I'm going to be bouncing around, trying to meet people, trying to talk to people, and hopefully grow this channel. So let's get in there. Maybe we'll get an interview with Brad and Andrew themselves. All right, let's go. Let's play some big pots. Texas poker, baby. Let's get right into the action here. On our first table, we have 7, 8 of spades. Early position makes it 15. I 3-bet to $50 in the cutoff, and only he makes the call. So going to our first flop here, day number 2 in Texas comes out 6-3 deuce with 2 clubs. We totally miss. When my opponent checks to me, I put out a standard C-bet, repping that aces, kings, and queens. I make it $75. Now the early position player goes into the tank and check raises me. Check raises me up to $175. He really shouldn't have any check raises on this board because I can have all the overpairs. He's only repping sets basically, but not much I can do here with 8 high. I make the fold and surrender on my first hand. Moving on here, we have pocket queens in the big blind. Cutoff raises to 20. Button calls 20. I think about what sizing I want to 3-bet before the small blind puts in a 3-bet himself. He makes it $110. Now, this player was playing pretty conservative. He has about $800 in his stack, was talking to me about the vlog, about poker. I don't think he's getting too out of line here in the small blind, so I decide to flat call $110 with pocket queens. I just had an odd feeling about this hand that he was pretty strong. Out of the small blind, I think this guy's going to have aces, kings, and queens, and possibly ace-king, so I'd rather just see a flop first before I put in a ton of money. We end up going heads up here to the flop, which comes out all low cards. 8-6-3 rainbow. Now my opponent continues to bet for 175 into about 260. These are the times in poker where it's just really tough. Does he have a better pocket pair than me? Is he c-betting with ace-king? Does he have jacks or tens? You really just don't know. He's not really going to be connecting too hard on this board with any sets or 2 pairs. He shouldn't be 3-betting 8s or 6s out of the small blind. I think he would just call there. So I decide to call $175 and evaluate on the turn. The fourth card here is a deuce, doesn't help us at all, and now my opponent decides after tanking for about 10 seconds to go all in. He shoves all in here for about $550, and this is the spot I do not like to be in. If I make a big hero fold here and he shows pocket jacks, I'm going to feel stupid. If I fold and he shows an ace-king, I'm going to feel even more dumb. But if he has kings and aces, it's going to suck too if I call. So I don't really know what to do. I take a look at him. It just doesn't look like this guy is capable of shoving all in here with a bluff. And I don't think he's doing this with pocket jacks. So I tank forever and decide to make a big hero fold. I show my pocket queens, hoping that maybe my opponent will show his cards. Maybe.
Wow. You fold? That is beautiful.
I don't know. I think so.
Oh my
God. Small blind shows pocket kings, so we ended up getting coolered here, kings versus queens on an 8 high board, but we probably lost a minimum, saving about $500, so I'll take that as some run good. Nice hands, sir.
Yeah, very nice.
We get to our second table here and look down at pocket 10s. Under the gun raises to 15. I 3-bet it up to $65 in the hijack position. We're super deep, about $2,000 effective. The flop comes out 3, 5, 6 with 2 spades. My opponent checks to me. I put out a C-bet of $55. And now the under the gun player puts in a check raise to $155. This player type is totally different than the guy I just played my last hand with. This guy is a young player, pretty active, so I'm not going to fold yet. I make the call. He can be doing this with overpairs like 8s or 9s or possibly a flush draw or straight draw. The turn is a 7 of clubs, and now under the gun player snap checks it over to me. So pretty interesting here. He could be bluffing and could have just gave up. Maybe he hit the 7 with a hand like 7-8 or 7-10, A7 of spades, something like that. So I decide to keep betting here. I bet $200, and he snap calls $200. The final card here is the 8 of spades, probably the worst card in the deck. Any 4 or any 9 makes a straight, and the front door flush gets there. My opponent checks to me, and I don't think I have any other option. I check back. He shows 9-7 of spades, so he made a flush and a straight. He had a pair on the turn as well, so not running too hot here in the first hour or so of our session. We're down about $1,000 so far. Alright, it is our turn to win a hand. We have pocket 8s in the middle position. Under the gun straddles to 10. I raise 230 and only the small blind calls. So going heads up here to a flop, which we flop an overpair on 5-6 deuce. Small blind checks to me. I put out a C bet of $50 trying to get value from any 6, any 5, straight draws, or even ace high. He makes a call for 50 going to the turn, which is a 9. When he checks it over to me, I decide to check this one back. Even though I blocked the straight with 7-8, it's not the best card here. He could have 9-10. 8-9, 7-8, pocket 5s, pocket 6s. The river comes off as 7. Pretty great card for us. We make a straight, and now the small blind leads out 4-1. Black chip, $100. I have to decide what sizing should I raise here with my straight. Obviously want to go pretty big, pretty polarized here. I basically have a straight or nothing when I raise. So I decide to go big, trying to get called by all of his 2 pairs, his sets, maybe worse straights like 3-4. So I decide to put out a bet of $425. Very large bet here, trying to get him to hero call me with all of his strong hands. He thinks for about 30 seconds and folds. So finally taking down our first pot here at Texas Card House. Meetup game day. Let's keep this rolling. Next hand we're going to go over, we have 6-5 of diamonds. Early position raises 220. I 3-bet 275. Small blind cold call 75, and early position player folds. So going heads up here to the flop of ace king 7 with 1 diamond. Small blind checks to me. Not a great board for our actual hand, but pretty good for our 3-betting range. So we're going to rep pretty big here. We bet $65. This bet is designed to get middling pocket pairs that we're losing to fold, like 8s, 9s, 10s, and jacks. However, my opponent makes the call for $65. If I turn any more equity like a straight draw or flush draw, I'm definitely going to be barreling big. However, the turn is the queen of clubs. Doesn't help us at all. Small blind checks to me, and I am not going to be putting any more money in this pot. I give up. I check back, going to the river, which is another king. Now, the small blind decides to bet. He slides out about $150 here, and I contemplate for about 10 seconds putting in a massive raise to like 700 or 800, given the fact that this board's going to hit my range better than it'll hit his, but that wouldn't really make much sense given the fact that we check back on the turn. I think it'd be a huge punt, so I surrender here. Moving on to the next hand. Now introducing, sitting in seat number 5, weighing in at 126 pounds, standing 7 foot 1 inch tall, fighting out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Brad the Giraffe Owen. Alright, that introduction might have been a little overkill. However, it's pretty cool playing with this guy after being a fan for so many years. Let's sit down and get some Bradley Bucks, or whatever he calls them. In this next hand, we look down with a big lick. 9-6 suited in the cutoff, raise it up to $20. The button calls 20, and the big blind calls 20. So going 3 ways to a flop, which we flop a flush draw on 8-4 deuce with 2 spades. I put out a continuation bet of $35. The button calls 35, and the big blind folds. The turn card is the 10 of clubs, now giving us a gut shot straight draw to go along with our flush draw, and it's an overcard to the 8, so I think it's a pretty good card to keep barreling here. I bet $100, and my opponent thinks for a while and calls. I'm basically just naming my own price here with my big draw. Going here to the river, which is a total brick. We totally miss our flush and straight draws, so we just give up, check it over to our opponent, and he puts out a huge bet. He bets $350, nothing I can do here but fold. We just cannot get too much going here, missing a lot of draws and not making too many value hands. Next hand we have King Queen, raise it up to $20 in early position. We get 3 callers and the big blind calls, so going 5 ways to a flop, which comes out King 3-4 with 2 diamonds. The big blind checks to me, and I decide, given the fact that we're so multi-way and I'm out of position, I check my top pair. The next player checks, the hijack checks, and the button checks, so it checks all the way around on the flop. The turn card is the queen of spades, giving us top 2 pair, and now the big blind leads out super tiny. He bets $20. So I don't know what he's trying to do with this bet. I decide to raise it up here. I make it $135, and now the player next to act that checked back on the flop ends up calling $135. The rest of the players end up folding back to the big blind, and the big blind tanks forever and decides to call as well. So kind of an interesting odd hand here with top two pair. I'm guessing my opponents are all on flush draws or straight draws. With about $500 in the middle, the dealer pulls in the chips, going three ways to the river, which is a 9, offsuit 9. And I want you guys to pause the video now and think to yourself, why is this 9 a bad card? What hand should we be most worried about whenever we see the river come out a 9? If you pick Jack 10 for a straight, then you are correct. Now we have to decide what we should do here on the river when the big blind checks to us. I don't think my opponents can have many strong hands whenever they check the flop and then just call my bet on the turn. So I think a check is actually better here. I could potentially induce a bluff from the player next to act by checking this river, and if my opponent does have Jack 10, he'll bet and I'll call, so I'll get the showdown probably as cheaply as possible. So I check, and now the next act player decides to bet. He puts in a pretty big bet of $275. The big blind folds and I snap call. Now the next act player shows deuce 5 of clubs for 5 high. I showed my top two pair, so I'm going to win this one. Finally getting some chips pushed towards us. We've been losing the whole night, so it's good to finally win a big pot. Moving on, we have pocket 10s. Under the gun plus 1 raises to 20. I 3-bet to $70 next to act. Now the player next to me goes into the tank, starts thinking, and decides to cold 4-bet. He 4-bets it to $225. Folds all the way back around to me. I look at the guy's stack. He has about $1,600 or $1,700. I cover him, and I make the call for $225. Going to the flop in a 4-bet pot, which comes out ace jack 4 with 2 hearts. Definitely not the board we were looking to see. We check, and our opponent checks back. The turn card is the 8 of hearts, now giving us a 10 high flush draw. I contemplate turning my hand into a bluff and leading, but I decide to check, and my opponent checks again. So going here to the river. The final card is the 5 of spades, and now I decide to turn my pocket 10s into a bluff, trying to get him to fold hands like queens or kings. I bet $200, and looking back, I really don't like this play. Given the fact that this is the river and there's no more action, he's just going to call here a lot of the time just to see my cards. It's not that big compared to the size of the pot. So I bet $200. He thinks for about 30 seconds and calls. I tell him I got pocket 10s. He shows pocket kings, so he's going to win this one. We end up just bluffing off $200 that we didn't need to do. Moving on here, I have pocket 3s from early position. There's an under the gun straddle to 10. I just called 10 and 4 other players call, so going 6 ways to the flop, which I flop a set. The flop is pretty favorable. It comes 8-5-3 with 2 hearts, flopping bottom set. I lead right out for $50. Under the gun plus 1 calls, and the big blind calls. So going 3 ways to the turn, which is the deuce of clubs. We keep betting here, putting out a big bet, $130, trying to get value from top pair, straight draws, and flush draws. Only the under the gun plus 1 player calls, and the big blind folds. We are going heads up here to the river with about $470 in the middle, which comes off the 6 of diamonds. I continue to bet. I put in 2 black chips, $200 here with my set of 3s, trying to get value from any pair, possibly 2 pair. My opponent calls. I show the set of 3s, and they are good. We end up taking down a pretty sizable pot here and a limped pot, getting 3 straights of value. That's what I'm talking about. The chips are finally coming back in my direction. Honestly, for a Texas game, this game is pretty bad. There's really not much action, a lot of young players who seem to know what they're doing. So I put in a table switch, and I end up switching over to a much better table with a lot more money and a lot more action. We're having some drinks, having some fun. First hand, we're going to play at this new table. We raised to $30 with ace 5 of clubs from early position. Late position player calls, the button calls $30, and the big blind calls $30. So going to a flop, which we flop pretty well, 6-7-5 with 2 clubs, flopping bottom pair and the nut flush draw. The big blind decides he's going to lead right out here, betting $75. I could be raising on this flop, but I got 2 more players behind me, and the board is super wet and connected. I don't want to get re-raised off my equity, so I make the call for $75. The late position player calls $75, and the button gives his cards back to the dealer. 3 ways to the turn, which is the jack of clubs. Boom. Right there, we make the nut flush. The big blind checks, unfortunately. I look back at my hand to pretend like I'm looking for a club, but I already know that I have it. I got the nuts here. I bet out $200. Now the action is on the late position player, and he starts thinking, looking over at my stack. He has way more money than me, probably $6,000 or $7,000, so obviously looking for this guy to get involved here. Not really sure what he can have. Maybe just a hand like king something with a club, or possibly a pair and a straight draw. He decides after a while that he's going to let his cards go. Now the action's back on the big blind, who let out on the flop and then checked the turn. He ends up making the call for $200. The river is pretty great for our hand. It's another 5, the 5 of diamonds. We're making trips here along with our flush. The big blind checks to me, and I put out a small bet of $200. Just really trying to get a crying call from one single pair hand. I don't think he has much here. Probably a 7, pocket 8s or pocket 9s. He says to me, "It sounds like you're milking me, man. I don't know if I should call here." But eventually, he puts in the chips. I show the ace-5 of clubs for the nut flush, and it is good. So we win another pot here. Texas Card House in Dallas. This is definitely the table we want to be on here. There's a lot of drinks going around and people having fun, and we get another special guest, Andrew Neeme, the OG vlogger, the one who started it all here. He is definitely an inspiration when it comes to poker vlogging and poker, so we get to play with him for the next 30 minutes. Unfortunately, in those 30 minutes, we were never able to get into a significant hand with Andrew, but the next hand we're going to go over here, I have King Jack raised it to $30 from early position, the button, and the big blind call. So going here to the flop, which we flop top pair with a king kicker on Jack 5-5, 2 spades, the big blind checks. I put out a pretty small continuation bet of $50. The action now is on the button, who seems like a player who likes to get in the mix. He makes the call for $50 before the big blind puts in a check raise to $175. So kind of an odd spot here. He's basically repping a 5 or nothing, possibly a flush draw, but I don't think this player would check raise a flush draw. My hand is just too strong to fold and not strong enough to put in another raise, so I make the call for $175. The button thinks for some time and ends up letting his cards go. So we're going here to the turn, which comes off the 8 of clubs. So pretty much a total brick here. The big blind continues to bet now. He bets $225. So the bet is going up a little bit, but it doesn't feel as strong. I think this player could be doing this with maybe a hand like Queen Jack, Ace Jack, or King Jack himself. I decide I'm going to call here on the turn, and if he barrels big again on the river, I'll fold. The river comes off the 3 of spades. Now the big blind checks to me. Given the fact that the front door flush came in, I guess I could turn my hand into a bluff trying to get him off a 5 or ace jack, but I don't think this player is going to be folding, so I check back. He shows Jack 9 for top pair 9 kicker. I show King Jack for top pair king kicker, which is going to win here, taking down another pot. We were stuck over $1,000 just about 2 hours ago, and now we are up about $1,000. It's always a good session when you start off down, claw all the way back to even, and end up winning on the night. In the game for $4,600, cashing out for $5,300 and change, making about $750, which is great. We look over at the bar, and Andrew and Brad are having some drinks with some vlog watchers, so poker is done for the night. We're going to head over there, have a beer, have some fun. Alright guys, we are back here in Miami. What a crazy couple days there in Dallas. If you have never been to a Brad Andrew meetup game before, I highly recommend it. It was a ton of fun. They had like 12 2-5 games the whole night, so the action was crazy. And I got to play at the same table as Andrew and Brad, which was pretty cool. Honestly, the best part of the night though was afterwards, a couple of us went to the bar, had some drinks, got to talk about poker, non-poker related things. Kind of a cool bonding experience with them. It was a lot of fun. When this video comes out, however, I'm going to be in Vegas already. Going to be there June 16th through the 20th. Going to be playing at Bellagio, Aria, and the Wynn. Hopefully playing 5-10 and maybe higher. If you guys don't follow me, go follow me on Instagram, Lexo Poker. I'm going to be making updates on there, so you'll be able to see where I'm at. And it should be fun. Then going back to Texas, Austin. Going to be playing on the live stream, TCH Live on July 8th. And then the Lodge Live on July 10th. So, busy couple weeks here in the next month or so. I'm excited for it. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like and subscribe button. Come out with videos just like this 1 to 2 times per week. All right, that is it for this one, guys. Until next time, I'll see you.